I'm Faith, 30 years old, and on my last birthday, my father handed me an envelope that would shatter everything I believed about my family. He stood in my doorway, the first time he'd visited my apartment in 3 years, and said words I'll carry to my grave. Your grandmother left this for you. She died believing you'd amount to nothing. But inside that envelope was a letter, and the first line read, If you're reading this, you survived your parents. I knew you would. What I found next, a key, a secret, and documents hidden for 5 years, changed everything I thought I knew about my grandmother, my father, and the inheritance I was told I didn't deserve. Before I tell you what happened, if you find this story worth hearing, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let me take you back to 5 years ago, to my grandmother's funeral, where this story really begins. The funeral home smelled like lilies and money. My grandmother, Eleanor Mercer, lay in a mahogany casket that probably cost more than my car. White flowers cascaded around her like she was sleeping in a garden, and somewhere behind the mourners, a string quartet played something soft and forgettable. My father, Richard Mercer, stood at the center of the room, not grieving, receiving. He shook hands with business partners, accepted condolences with practiced solemnity, his Rolex catching the chandelier light every time he reached out to clasp someone's shoulder. Thank you for coming. Mother would have appreciated it. I watched from the corner, invisible. My stepmother Victoria floated through the crowd in a black Chanel dress, playing the role of dutiful daughter-in-law. She guided my half-brother Derek, then 19, home from his freshman year at an Ivy League school, to stand beside our father. This is Derek, she told everyone who would listen. Eleanor's beloved grandson. She adored him. No one introduced me. I was 25 then, already teaching 3rd grade at a public school in a low-income neighborhood, already the family disappointment, already the daughter who chose a job instead of a career. But here's what I kept thinking about, standing alone by the flower arrangements. My grandmother used to call me her little star. She taught me to read before kindergarten. She let me stay with her for 2 years after my mother died, and those were the happiest years of my childhood. She wrote me letters, actual handwritten letters, even after I grew up. She always had stationery in her desk drawer, cream-colored paper with her initials embossed at the top. I didn't know then that those letters would matter, that she'd been preparing something for years. I only knew that she was gone, and no one in my family seemed to notice I was grieving too. To understand what came next, you need to understand where I came from. My mother, Linda, died of breast cancer when I was 12. I remember the hospital room, the machines beeping, her hand going cold in mine. I remember my father standing by the window, staring out at nothing, like he'd already left. He didn't know how to be a single parent, or maybe he didn't want to know. 2 weeks after the funeral, he drove me to my grandmother's house in Vermont, a beautiful old colonial with a wraparound porch and a garden full of roses, and said he needed time to process. That time lasted 2 years. Those 2 years with Grandma Eleanor were everything. She made me pancakes shaped like stars. She read me Anne of Green Gables out loud, doing all the voices. She told me stories about my mother as a little girl, stories my father never shared because talking about Mom made him uncomfortable. Your mother was brave, Grandma told me once, tucking me into bed in the room that had been Mom's. And you're brave too, Faith. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. When I was 14, my father remarried. Victoria was elegant, polished, and 10 years younger than him. She wanted me home, she said, wanted to be a real family. So I moved back into my father's new house, a 5-bedroom colonial in the suburbs. My room was the smallest one, tucked next to the garage, far from the master suite. A year later, Derek was born. And just like that, I became invisible. I didn't realize it then, but those 2 years with my grandmother weren't just happy memories. She was already planning something, already worried about what her son might become. By the time I graduated college with a degree in elementary education, my father had stopped pretending to be interested in my life. He didn't come to my graduation. Client meeting, he said. You understand. I understood perfectly. Derek, meanwhile, got a party when he was accepted to university. 50 guests, catered. My father gave a toast about the future of the Mercer name. I sat at the back table nursing a glass of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget and watched my family celebrate the son who mattered. Every holiday, every family gathering, the same pattern. My father would corner me at some point and ask, "Still teaching?" "Yes, Dad." "What's the salary for that nowadays, 30,000? 42. He'd laugh. Not cruelly, just dismissively, like I'd told a mildly amusing joke. I give Derek that much for his allowance. He wasn't exaggerating. Derek drove a BMW that our father bought him. I drove a 2012 Honda Civic I'd purchased secondhand with my own savings. "Daughters," my father once said to a business partner at Thanksgiving, loud enough for me to hear. "They don't understand ambition. It's biological. Women think small. Family, feelings, that sort of thing. Nothing wrong with it. Just don't expect them to build anything." Victoria would nod along, patting my hand sympathetically. "Faith is nurturing," she'd say, like it was a consolation prize. That's her gift. My gift. Teaching children to read, staying late to help struggling students, making $42,000 a year while my father bought boats. I never argued, never defended myself. I'd learned early that arguing with Richard Mercer only made things worse. So I stayed quiet. I stayed small. And I believed, for a very long time, that my grandmother had been disappointed in me too. 2 weeks after the funeral, we gathered for the reading of my grandmother's will. The law office was downtown, all dark wood and leather chairs. My father sat at the head of the table like he owned the place. Victoria was on his right, Derek on his left. I sat at the far end, near the door. The attorney, not someone I recognized, a younger man who kept glancing at my father nervously, cleared his throat and began reading. I don't remember most of it. Legal language, property descriptions, charitable donations. What I remember is this. To my son, Richard Mercer, I leave 90% of my estate, to be managed and distributed among family members at his discretion. My father nodded, unsurprised. To my granddaughter, Faith Mercer, I leave the sum of $10,000 to be used toward the purchase of a reliable vehicle. $10,000. Enough for a used car. That was it. Victoria reached over and squeezed my hand. "That's sweet," she whispered. "She wanted you to be safe on the road." I nodded, unable to speak. Derek didn't even look at me. He was already asking our father about investment strategies for his portion. And my father smiled. Not a happy smile, a satisfied one. "Mother always knew what people deserved," he said. I signed where they told me to sign. I shook hands with the attorney. I walked out of that office believing that my grandmother, the woman who called me her little star, had looked at my life and found it wanting. But something nagged at me. The attorney, he'd hesitated before reading certain sections. His eyes had flickered to my father, then away. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. 5 years passed. I kept teaching. I moved into a studio apartment, 400 square feet of independence that I could actually afford. I stopped going to most family gatherings. Nobody seemed to notice. Then came my 30th birthday. I'd bought myself a small cake from the bakery down the street. Chocolate with raspberry filling, my favorite. I was sitting alone at my tiny kitchen table, a single candle lit, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my father was standing there. First time he'd visited in 3 years. He was wearing a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my rent, and he was holding a yellowed envelope. "Found this in Mother's things," he said, not bothering with hello. "Must have gotten mixed in with some old papers. Figured you'd want it." He held it out. I took it. "Don't get your hopes up," he added, already turning to leave. "She wrote it before she died, probably some sentimental nonsense." He paused at the top of my stairs. "She died believing you'd amount to nothing, you know. Told me herself. Said she worried about you." Then he was gone. I stood in my doorway, holding the envelope, my birthday cake melting behind me. The paper was old, slightly brittle, my grandmother's handwriting on the front. For Faith, to be delivered on her 30th birthday. My father hadn't opened it. The seal was still intact, that old-fashioned wax seal my grandmother used, with her initials pressed into it. Slowly, I walked back inside, sat down at my table, and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, folded around a small brass key. The letter began, "My dearest Faith, if you're reading this, it means you survived your parents. I knew you would." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. I read the words again. "If you're reading this, it means you survived your parents. Not your father, parents, plural. Like my grandmother knew exactly what kind of household I'd grown up in." I kept reading. "My sweet girl, I need you to understand something. I have never, not for one single day, believed you were anything less than extraordinary. If your father told you otherwise, he was lying. He lies about many things. It's a habit he learned from his father, and one I failed to break." Tears were streaming down my face now. 5 years of believing she'd given up on me. 5 years of carrying that shame. The key enclosed opens a safe deposit box at First National Bank, downtown branch. Box number 1247. "I have named you as the sole authorized person. Not your father, not his wife, not his son. Only you. Inside that box, you will find everything they tried to hide from you. Documents, proof, your inheritance, the real one, not the scraps Richard wanted you to have." I set the letter down, picked it up again. "Read that paragraph 3 more times. Your inheritance, the real one." "I didn't leave these things with my regular attorney," the letter continued. "Richard would have found them. I left them where only you could reach them, when you were old enough to know what to do. There is also a card in the box for Margaret Holloway. She's an old friend, and she knows everything. Call her if you need help. Remember, my star, you are not what they made you believe. You never were. All my love, always, Grandma Eleanor." The key was cold in my palm. Brass, with the number 1247 engraved on it. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I called in sick to work, the first time in 3 years, and drove downtown. First National Bank was one of those old stone buildings that looked like it had been guarding people's secrets since the Civil War. Marble floors, brass fixtures, the kind of hushed atmosphere where everyone speaks in whispers. I approached the front desk with my driver's license and the key. "I need to access safe deposit box 1247. The clerk, young, professional, slightly bored, typed something into her computer, then stopped, typed again. Her eyebrows rose. "One moment, please, ma'am. I need to get my manager." 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Thomas Caldwell, the branch manager. He was in his mid-40s, graying at the temples, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Miss Mercer," he said, studying his screen. "This box was opened by Eleanor Mercer in 2019, and you were added as the sole authorized accessor at that time. No one else," he emphasized those words carefully, "has permission to open it. Several inquiries have been made over the years, but we've followed Mrs. Mercer's instructions precisely." "Inquiries?" I asked. "From whom?" He hesitated. "I'm not at liberty to say, but your grandmother was very specific. She told me personally, 'If anyone else asks, including my son, tell them there's nothing here.' And I have." He leaned forward slightly. "She also told me something else, Miss Mercer. She said, 'When my granddaughter comes, and she will come, tell her I never stopped believing in her. Not for one day.'" I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. Thomas Caldwell stood. "Let me take you to the vault." He led me through a heavy steel door, down a corridor lined with hundreds of small metal boxes, to number 1247. "Take all the time you need," he said, and left me alone. The box was larger than I expected. Inside was a thick manila folder, a smaller envelope, and a leather portfolio embossed with a law firm's name I didn't recognize. I started with the folder. The first document made me sit down hard on the vault room's small bench. Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Grace Mercer. Executed, March 15, 2019. 2019, 2 years before she died. After the will I'd heard read in that attorney's office. I scanned the pages, legal language swimming before my eyes until I found the key paragraphs. "To my granddaughter, Faith Eleanor Mercer, I bequeath the following. My education trust fund, currently valued at approximately $1.8 million, to be used for her personal enrichment and security, and my property located at 847 Mountain View Road, Stowe, Vermont, currently valued at approximately $1 million, which she may inhabit, sell, or manage at her sole discretion. $2.8 million. The property in Vermont. The house where I'd spent the happiest 2 years of my childhood. I kept reading. To my son, Richard Mercer, I leave the sum of $50,000 and my sincere hope that he will one day understand that family is not a business to be managed, but a garden to be tended. 50,000, not 90%. $50,000. The will was signed, witnessed, and notarized. Official, legal, real. There was more in the folder. Bank statements showing the trust fund balance. The deed to the Vermont property, still in my grandmother's name, never sold as my father had claimed, and transfer records showing that someone had been withdrawing money from the trust. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Starting exactly when Derek enrolled at Wharton. I laid out the bank statements on the vault room bench like evidence at a crime scene. The pattern was unmistakable. September 2022, $85,000 withdrawn. Derek's first year at Wharton, September 2023, $82,000 withdrawn. Second year, May 2024, $150,000 withdrawn, noted as business investment. Mercer Properties, LLC. Total, $317,000 from my trust fund, money my grandmother left specifically for me. And that wasn't counting the Vermont house, which my father had told everyone was sold to cover estate taxes. The deed in my hands said otherwise. The property was still there, still titled to Eleanor Mercer, still mine. I sat in that vault room for almost an hour, reading and rereading. My hands had stopped shaking. Something else had replaced the shock, something cold and clear. Derek's MBA, his prestigious degree, his networking events, his future CEO trajectory. All of it paid for with my inheritance. My father's expansion of his real estate business, funded by money that was supposed to be my security, and they'd done it while telling me my grandmother was disappointed in me, while making me believe I deserved nothing. At the bottom of the folder, I found a handwritten note from my grandmother. Faith, I know what you're feeling right now, betrayed, furious, perhaps even broken. But you're not broken, my star. You never were. I didn't leave you defenseless. Read everything, call Margaret, and remember, the truth has a way of finding the light. Sometimes it just needs a little help. I packed everything back into the folder, tucked it under my arm, and walked out of that vault. The Faith who went in was a woman who believed she'd been forgotten. The Faith who came out knew she'd been robbed, and she was going to get it all back. Margaret Holloway answered on the second ring. Miss Mercer? Not a question. Like she'd been waiting for this call for years. Your grandmother told me you'd reach out eventually. I just wasn't sure when. Margaret's office was in a converted brownstone on a tree-lined street, the kind of place that whispered old money and discretion. She met me at the door herself, a silver-haired woman in her early 70s with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant business. I was Eleanor's attorney for her real estate planning, she explained, leading me to a sitting room with tea already waiting. Not the family attorney, Richard controlled that relationship. I was her friend first, her legal counsel second. She poured tea with steady hands. I witnessed the 2019 will. I notarized it. I have copies of everything you found in that box, plus email confirmations from the notary public and both witnesses. She met my eyes. Your father submitted the 2015 will to probate court, the one that predates the 2019 version. In legal terms, that's called fraud. The word hung in the air. Fraud. What are my options? I asked. Margaret set down her teacup. Option 1, we go to the authorities, file charges. Your father could face felony charges for executor fraud and potentially theft. There would be an investigation, a trial, media coverage. She paused. Option 2, we confront him directly, with evidence, and negotiate a settlement. Full transfer of the trust fund and property, plus restitution for what was taken. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal charges. Would he agree to that? Margaret's smile was thin. Richard Mercer would agree to almost anything to avoid public humiliation. The question is, Faith. She leaned forward. Do you want this handled quietly? Or do you want him to face consequences where it hurts most? I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to watch my father get led away in handcuffs, wanted the world to see who he really was, wanted Derek to understand that his shiny MBA came with a price tag paid in his sister's stolen inheritance. But another part of me, the part shaped by my grandmother's letters, her patience, her quiet strength, wanted something different. I don't want to destroy him, I finally said. I just want what's mine. And I want him to admit it, really admit it, in front of people who matter to him. Margaret nodded slowly. A public acknowledgement without public prosecution. Difficult to engineer. What if there was already a public event, I said. Something where his reputation is on display, where the right people are watching. That's when I remembered the invitation. It had arrived last week, embossed gold on cream cardstock. You are cordially invited to celebrate the 65th birthday of Richard Mercer. The party was in 3 weeks, at the country club where my father played golf with judges and businessmen. 80 guests. The social event of the season for his circle. Victoria had called afterward to remind me to dress appropriately. Don't embarrass us, Faith. You know how your father's friends can be. I told Margaret about the party. Her eyes lit up with something that might have been admiration or anticipation. So, she said, you want to give your father a birthday present he'll never forget? I want to give him exactly what he deserves, in front of the people whose opinions he actually cares about. Margaret reached for her calendar. 3 weeks, she said. We have work to do. The invitation sat on my kitchen counter like a dare. Celebrating 65 years of Richard Mercer, gold embossed, formal script, the kind of stationery that cost more per sheet than some people spend on dinner. Victoria called 3 days before the event. Faith? Her voice dripped with false warmth. Just checking? You received the invitation? I did. Wonderful. Now, about your outfit. Your father's colleagues will be there. The Hendersons, the Clarks, Judge Morrison. These people notice things. I understand. Wear something appropriate, something that fits. A pause. And Faith? Don't stand in the corner like you did at your grandmother's funeral. It looks odd. Mingle, smile, act like part of the family. I counted to 3 before responding. I'll do my best to represent the family well, Victoria. That's all we ask. She hung up. I looked at the dress I'd already chosen, hanging in my closet. Navy blue, simple but elegant. My grandmother's pearl earrings to go with it, the only jewelry she'd left me outright, placed in the safe deposit box instead of listed in any will. And in my bag, a folder. Certified copies of every document I'd found. The 2019 will, the bank statements, the deed, the notary's confirmation. Margaret would be there too. Not as my guest, as someone who had so many fond memories of Eleanor and had heard about the celebration through mutual friends. Perfectly innocent, completely deniable. My father wanted a birthday party. He was going to get one, and for the first time in 30 years, I was going to speak up at a family gathering. The difference was, this time, I had the receipts. I need to pause here for a moment, because this is the part where everything changed, where I stopped being the daughter who accepted whatever scraps my family threw at me and started being someone else entirely. Have you ever stood at a crossroads like that? Knowing that whatever you choose, there's no going back? If you're still with me, if this story resonates with something in your own life, I'd love for you to hit that like button, not for me. For everyone else out there who needs to know they're not alone. Now, let me tell you about the week before the party. 1 week before the party, my father summoned me. That's the only word for it. Summoned. A text message that read, "Come to the house. 7 p.m. Family meeting." I drove to the house I'd grown up in, the 5-bedroom colonial that had never felt like home. Victoria answered the door and led me to my father's